In this video, I'm going to attempt to answer the frequently most asked questions that I get about the Middle Fork of the Salmon River. This time of year, I get a lot of questions about planning trips, what to expect, what to think, when, all these questions. And unfortunately, this is my busiest time of year, so I can't answer them all. I've done videos like this before. I'll try to link to it up here somewhere. Hopefully I remember to do that. I've done videos like this before, and I continue to get questions, and they're good questions, and I'm going to try to put them here on video to share the best answer I can. Again, just because I'm so busy, I can't always call everybody back and respond to messages with questions about the Middle Fork. And I have them listed here. I'm going to go through them one at a time, and hopefully they're good answers. I'm just doing the best that I can with the knowledge that I have. So here we go. So I think of the Middle Fork as having three distinct seasons. One is sort of the early high water season. This is May into June. It could even go into July depending on how things go. But let's just say this is generally June-ish time, which depends on the snowpack, the snow melt, weather, a bazillion factors. The river can be really high. The weather can be variable. A lot of things can happen. It can also be perfect. It's just sort of a crapshoot depending on a lot of factors. The July timeframe, let's say like late June through July, maybe even into August potentially, is the sweet spot. That's usually when it's easier to run from boundary. The weather's generally good. The flows are typically moderated. That's sort of the sweet spot, but it's also when everybody applies for permits. That's the most popular time because it's sort of the sweet spot. And then late July, sometime through August into September, that's a little bit lower water. I wouldn't call it low water until September. I think the Middle Fork at like 1.8 feet is an amazing trip. So I wouldn't call it low water until September. So we'll call it like not high water, maybe it's medium-ish water. I don't know. But late July into August is just such a nice time to go. What's hard about that time frame is the first 20 miles, 25 miles down to Indian are just really tricky at low water. There's not enough water on the upper section. And so we will fly our guests into Indian Creek and start our trips to Indian. And it's from Indian down, the Middle Fork is an awesome trip. I actually personally think it's a better trip than from Boundary down. That's just an opinion. I'm sure a lot of you disagree with me. I just love starting trips to Indian and going down. But that August time frame, the weather's typically nice, the water's lower. You just have to kind of manage the low water issues that come with the first 25 miles. And so every year there's new rapids. This year, there were new rapids 2 years ago. I'm recording this in 2025, so there's the new Velvet, there's the new Hell's Half Mile, a few more things. But every year there's new rapids. And every year I don't know what they're going to look like. I get questions all the time. What's Velvet going to be like? What's Hell's Half Mile going to be like? It depends on high water, how things move around, just a bazillion factors. So I don't unfortunately have the answer to that question until I go out there. Now people give me information, but I've learned over time that information is sort of suspect. And so as long as I know the rapids are runnable, I have a crew of guides that are like solid on class 4. As long as I know it's not class 5, we're going out. Now, if you want details about what to do, where to go, blah, 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 I can't answer that until I've actually been there to see it. And it's really hard to communicate those things. And so generally, your best bet is to wait till some people have gone, they put some YouTube videos up, and then you can make a decision on your own. But there's always new rapids on the Middle Fork, whether it's the ones that happened a couple years ago that are constantly evolving or whatever. There will be new rapids in the future too. So it's just part of the nature of that river. Although people generally call it class 3 plus at normal flows, because of its wilderness nature, it changes. And it's more difficult of a river than that. The rapids individually are class 3 plus, but the whole experience of the potential of new rapids, the potential of water level changes, of high water or low water, the wilderness aspect, in my mind, puts the Middle Fork into more of a class 4 category because of all the unknowns and things you're dealing with. The snowpack right now, I'm recording this early March 2025, is like, I don't know, 110% of normal. It's higher than normal, but not a lot. And for me, I'm looking for 80 to 120%. If it's above 120, I start worrying about super high water. If it's lower than 80, I worry we're going to break a bunch of gear, and August is going to be hard. If it's in that sweet spot of 80 to 120, I'm not really paying attention to it. It's not something that I watch that carefully because it can change. It can be a low snowpack, but we can have a cold, wet spring and have super high water in June. And then we can have a huge snowpack. It can melt early, and we can have low water. So it just doesn't really always matter what the snowpack is. What matters is how and when it melts. And we won't know that until a week or two before we start running trips. Like, honestly, in my mind, there's almost no reason to look at snowpack other than to make conversation. I do it to make conversations all the time. People at the bar, my friends, like, what's the snowpack like? And then we talk about it. It's a conversation starter. Like, how's the weather, right? It's not, but for me, I'm not seriously looking at snowpack until a couple weeks before our first trip. And I'm like, oh man, that's actually pretty juicy. And of course, I pay attention to it. If it's like 200% of normal, I do know that. But whether it's 110 or 130 or 70% or 90%, it doesn't really affect it all that much. And if you have a trip plan, you're probably going to go, and you're not going to cancel it now in March, but you might cancel 2 weeks before, a week before, when you see what's happening, whether that's super high water or super low water. This is the most common question I get. It's the hardest for me to answer. People call me and say, hey, I have both the Rogue and the South Fork. Can I handle the Middle Fork of the Salmon? And I really can't give you advice about what you can or can't do for a number of reasons. Just because you've boated something doesn't mean you boated it well. If you survived the South Fork of the American, that's different than like doing it really well. Or if you crushed it, I don't know how you did. Like, did you absolutely catch every eddy? Is it super easy for you? Or did you just kind of get down it and barely make it? And you have to be sort of self-aware of where you live on the ability category. You can tell me the long list of rivers you've done. I can't give you that advice whether you're ready or not ready to run the river. I'm just not going to do it because I just don't know. Unless I know, I boat with you, I know you really well, I can't. Also, people want different experiences. Like, if you can barely handle the Middle Fork of the Salmon, yeah, sure, go. You're just going to go on an adventure, right? There's vacations and adventures. There's like the trip where you go, you grease all the lines, you get to camp, you go on hikes, and you have a cocktail, and you have a campfire, you tell stories. You wake up, you have eggs and bacon, and you go do it again. And then there's the trips where you have to get up early, and your boat pops along the way, and you're fixing that the whole time, and you're getting stuck all the time, and you're pulling into camp at dusk, and you're drying your clothes around the campfire, and you're maybe gonna have some flips and some wraps and just some issues. It depends on what kind of trip you want. Do you want the question is, are you good enough to have the fun vacation trip where it's a fun river trip? Or are you good enough to survive it and have a full-on adventure on your way down? Now, what do you want? I just don't know how good you are. I don't know what kind of trip you want. So unfortunately, I just don't give advice whether people are good enough to run the Middle Fork unless I know you and boat with you personally. One other little thing here is, if you boated stuff 10, 20 years ago, great, you have skill. But how much have you been boating recently? How much have you been boating this year, last year? How much are you boating between now and your trip? If you just go on one river trip a year and you haven't done the Middle Fork, you may not be in practice. And so I would highly recommend, if you're not sure if you're ready, go boating and just have self-awareness about how you do. There are, on the Middle Fork, camps that are better than others. There's camps I like more than others. I'm not going to tell you what they are, because if I have to compete with you for those camps in the round robin, I will shot myself in the foot. But these are camps that I personally think are the best because of the hikes they have, because memories I've had there, for a number of reasons. And so most of the camps, all the camps in the Middle Fork are great. I know we get uptight over certain camps that everybody sees are the best. We can fight over those, or everybody can fight over those. Great. What matters more than having the best camps is having the best mileage. And so I watched around Robins a lot. People are like thinking, oh, I got to make sure I get such and such a camp on day 4, 5, and 6. Well, it more depends on what happens to you day 1, 2, and 3 to set yourself up so your mileage days aren't too long or too short. So once you picked your 3rd camp, your 4th camp really depends on like what's the mileage down to there. So I'm not going to tell you my favorite camps, because they're my favorite camps for different reasons that you have favorite camps. And I don't want you just to look at my list and go, I'm taking those camps because Zach says are the best. There's so many great camps. What you really want to do is make sure you leave time on certain days to do certain hikes. If you have a 30-mile day on a day when there's a really cool hike or a really cool stop, you're kind of shot yourself in the foot. So I would look more on the things you want to do in the daily mileage more than anything else. I don't think there's a level that's too low to row the Middle Fork. The lowest I've done it is I think 1.47. That was in a sweep boat. If a sweep boat can get down at 1.47, you can certainly row it down at 1.47. And I've seen it done with 18-foot boats at that level. So that's the lowest I've seen it. I've heard of trips going as low as 1.32. There's not a level too low. It just depends like how much stuff you bring, how good are you, your willingness for pain, how physically fit you are. There's not a too low level. It just depends on you and your abilities. But like, it's a river that I've never heard of it being too low to go. The road generally opens, I think they're supposed to open at Memorial Day weekend. I don't know for sure. I don't ever go that early because I don't want to deal. I used to run earlier trips when we were always like worried about this. Like, is the road going to open? Is it not? And then it opens and it's snowing and we're stressed out. I just rarely run trips in that late May, early June timeframe because of the road and the potential for super high water. I had a lot of stress in my youth, and I'm fine not having that stress in my life now of again, high water and the road not opening. So I think they're supposed to open up by the end of May. I don't know for sure. I'm sure it depends on snowpack. That's the best answer I have. All right, this is the big question. Should we launch from Boundary or fly everything to Indian? And it's really hard to answer that question because rowing from Boundary to Indian at low water, and this is specifically a low water. Let's just say like below 2.2 feet or some low level. The question is, do we start at Boundary Creek or fly everything into Indian? Put everything in airplanes, fly it into Indian Creek. Or there's a hybrid you can deadhead. Private boaters can deadhead too, where like one boat and one person row the boats down, and then you fly people and gear into Indian Creek. That's another option you can do too. You can also, actually, now that I'm on options, you can start a Boundary and just fly heavy stuff into Indian. And when you get there, grab it. Like fly a bunch of the beer, maybe like just heavy things that you don't need for the first day or two. You can just put them on airplanes. Maybe it's one airplane flight, $800 or whatever. And that will make your boats lighter off the top. I've done videos before about deadheading or low water, Middle Fork, or if you just search Google, or YouTube, you'll find all these videos. This is just a tough question. I've seen people absolutely crush the first 25 miles. No problem. They know how to row. They have higher level skills. They know not to pack too heavy. They know to soften their boats. I've done videos about what to do. They do the right things, no problem. I also see people out there just getting trashed, just stuck, frustrated, pop boats. People that take, they're supposed to spend, maybe they plan to spend 1 or 2 nights on the upper section and end up accidentally 3 or 4 because they just aren't making miles every day for whatever reason. And then if you get to Indian, you can't continue down because you don't have enough space in a permit or whatever. So you have to fly stuff. People have to fly stuff out of Indian sometimes because they don't have enough days left because it took them so long to get there. So I've seen the gamut. I just don't know. I'm just going to give you the advice I've given everybody in a million videos I've done about this. Go light. Make sure you're good. Be with people you like and you respect and that you get along, that you see it as a fun adventure and a challenge and not something where you're going to bicker or get frustrated or some safety squirrel is going to want to do every rescue and get upset when they don't. There's just all kinds of things that can go wrong socially at low water. And if I haven't said deflate your tubes already, make sure your tubes are a bit deflated and do it. But if you have anxiety about it, you have kids, you have grandma, you have non-boaters, you have people that don't want an adventure, you can put everything in airplanes, fly it in. And I recommend that if you don't want the stress of it, which it can be a stress, just fly it in. Hopefully that's a good answer to your question. I'm not sure where to rent gear because I don't rent gear. I've never rented gear for the Middle Fork. I know there's places that do it. I would just Google Middle Fork of the Salmon raft rentals and gear rentals. I don't think anybody packs food. So if you want like your food bought and packed like you do in the Grand Canyon, I don't think that's an option. I do know there's gear rental places, raft rental places. They change year to year. I don't know who's doing it now, but just use Google. It'll have the answer for you. There's a few people that do shuttles, and the companies change year to year. So I don't know who's doing it right now for sure. We're using Salmon River Transportation Company as an outfitted business, and they're great guys. It's a great organization. I'd recommend them. But beyond them, I think Blackadar Boating, who rents gear also, they do shuttles. But I really like Salmon River Transportation Company. But again, go to Google. You can just Google Middle Fork Salmon shuttles, and you'll find a company that can help you out. Okay, Marsh Creek. I saved this question for last. This one's tougher to answer. When the water is high in the spring and you can't drive into Boundary Creek, you can launch basically off the highway on the way to the put-in at Marsh Creek and run, I don't know, it's like 25 miles of Marsh Creek down. It's super continuous. And so it goes actually pretty quick if you're, if there's no logs. The problem with Marsh Creek, well, one, if you have a swimmer, it's kind of terrifying because it's so continuous. So make sure you're a good boater. But there's also wood pretty much every year. And since the fires have happened, there's more wood and log jams than normal. This means a couple things. You could be doing full portages. You could come around a bend and there's just a riverwide log jam that's deadly. There's just wood issues on the super continuous section. So if you're going to do Marsh Creek, you probably want to talk to somebody who's been before. I know it's super handy to have kayakers that can go ahead and pro, but they're also putting their lives in danger a little bit too. And just because they see wood doesn't mean you can eddy out. It's so continuous. If you have a heavy-ish boat, you really can't eddy out before logs. And I feel like every year people do Marsh Creek, there's a fatality. Now that may not be an exact correlation. I might be wrong. It just seems like, in my mind, almost every year people are doing Marsh Creek, somebody dies up there on average once. So know you're doing something risky. It's continuous cold water with blind corners and logs is a risky endeavor. And it's not that hard. It's like 3+ probably for the most part. But the continuous of wood thing is a serious threat. You do have to contend with Dagger Falls, which, when you're sitting at home thinking about doing this, it seems like, oh, we'll just go over, it'll be fine. The Dagger Falls is a pretty legit rapid. I mean, I think some people call it Class 5. I'm not sure what to call it. It's interesting rapid for sure. But the issue is if you flip there, the river just goes. There's recovering your flip for the next 5-ish, 10 miles is really going to be hard. People have flipped there and taken super long swims. And so a lot of people get to Dagger Falls and portage. It is not easy to portage. It is a big up and around affair. It's a huge project. And so if you're going to run marsh, maybe think you're going to potentially portage and you want to be light so that you can carry all the stuff around. I've heard of people spending the entire day planning to portage marsh. So I would be very worried about Dagger Falls too. And the consequence of a flip or a swim is not good. There's not like a pool. If it was just Dagger Falls and a pool below, yeah, you could probably just push the boats over and catch them at the bottom, honestly. You could just ghost boat your boats and you're probably fine. Or you could just sit in them and pretend to row and go over them as well. Whatever. You could go over it. You can recover a flip. If it was flat, I'm saying if. You could recover the flip, you could recover the swimmers, but it's not. It's very swift with wood afterwards. So I'm not going to recommend people do marsh. Now, if you do it, you've listened to my concerns. You've listened to that and you do it anyway. You must be pretty amazing and awesome and you don't need my advice anyway. So I would just say, be really careful on Marsh Creek. So those are all my frequently asked questions. I hope that helped. I'm really sorry I can't return your phone call, your Facebook Messenger message, your Instagram direct message, your tweet, your text, or whatever. I'm really sorry. And maybe I will when I get some free time. But hopefully those things answered your questions. Those are the most common things I'm asked about the Middle Fork of the Salmon. if you're out there and you're a seasoned veteran and a pro, I'm really sorry you had to sit through that, first of all. But if you made it to here, please put more advice in the comments, or like say, take what I said and say, no, Zach's wrong. This is actually correct. This is how I feel. Please, those of you that know what you're talking about, add more advice down there. If you have questions, put them in the comments. I'm pretty likely to answer those questions more than I am to return a phone call, because if I answer a question, I know the people I'll answer it for people in the future. If I just call you back, I'm answering it for you. If I'm answering a question in the comments, I'm answering it for everybody else who wants to know. Plus, I can answer questions when I'm on a shuttle ride or sitting at takeout. It's hard for me to call people when I'm really busy on the river a bunch. So that's it. Thanks for watching. If you want to subscribe, that would be super cool. Like this. And that's it for this episode. See you next time.